name is the Local Mangaka, and this is my review of The Legend of Hei. I'm going to assume that for a lot of people watching, they've never heard of this movie before. Because I didn't either until very recently, and to be quite honest, this is my first Chinese animation movie ever. You know, Trump was right. We gotta watch out for China, because they got some dope cartoons. Tasteless jokes aside, I do hope that this review encourages other people to watch this movie, because I want to be the recommender of like niche cool movies, you know? Like yo, follow this channel if you want cool movie recommendations. And because I know cool movies, I'm the cool movie guy, I'm the local mangaka, I'm like that local guy who knows the niche stuff, and yeah. On to the review. The Legend of Hei, or Shao Hei, while made by a Chinese animation studio, is 100% inspired by anime. In fact, it actually has a listing on my anime list, so is it an anime? Is the Boondocks an anime? But yeah, regardless, it is very apparent that this movie has strong inspirations from anime. Particularly strong influences seem to come from Studio Ghibli, shonen action sequences, and also maybe even Akira. Also, is that dude the Goron from Breath of the Wild? But the story is also very strongly rooted in Chinese mythology, and so it does have its own cultural identity separate from anime. But I did mention some similarities to Studio Ghibli, and that is not a comparison I make lightly. This movie bears resemblance to Ghibli when it utilizes calm, majestic scenes of nature, but also with a touch of flightful imagination. For example, there's a large sequence of this movie dedicated to the main characters floating around in the middle of the ocean on a raft pushed around by magic metal little squares. And the image of a raft floating in the middle of the ocean is very simple, very serene, and also leads to several sequences of beautiful and evocative ocean imagery. But this whole sequence would not be possible without one subtle fantasy element, the magic metal squares. And to me, that felt very Ghibli-esque. However, I'd argue that most of this film has other elements that build upon its Ghibli influences. And one such element is the modernization of human civilization and how it impacts the old world of demons and nature. In fact, this movie is basically a 21st century Princess Mononoke. Both movies deal with the encroaching of human civilization upon nature, but instead of Irontown, you have subways, smartphones, and Snapchat filters. And this is where I think the influences of Akira come in. I definitely have a whole video essay planned on how Akira is a movie that is meticulously obsessed with urban human construction and its ensuing destruction. And I think that The Legend of Hei definitely emulates this obsession, but in a more modern manner. Speaking of which, the art style of this movie is more modern, because the original source material for The Legend of Hei is The Legend of Shao Hei, which is a flash animation web cartoon created by artist and film director MTJJ. And flash animation is different from traditional animation. It's much simpler, there's very little shading, and the movements are a lot quicker. And it's not necessarily worse than traditional animation, it's just different and more modern. But on the topic of more modern animation styles, that brings me to my favorite aspect of this movie, the fighting! Because holy, despite the simple flash-based character designs, the art direction in these fight scenes are astounding. Particularly the aerial combat. I am in love with the way that Wuxian flies around. Okay, I know it's pronounced more like a Wushan. I just want to force my anglicized pronunciations on y'all, you know? Like, I'm the local mangaka. But yeah, Wushan. I really like how the sh sounds in Chinese, you know? There's a lot of sh in the words and names of Chinese language. You know, like Wushan, Fangxi, Shaohei, Shumai. Okay, I know Shumai is spelled with an SH. No, yeah. Xie. Yeah, the way that Wushan just flies around, goes boom, 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 and you know, it's so freaking cool! It's like, ever since I was a kid, I always thought about how cool it would be to just like instantly drop and just fly like a bullet. Like look at these fight scenes. If these magical bouts of delicious combat don't make you want to watch this movie, I don't know what will. This definitely had some of the coolest animated fight scenes I've ever seen in a movie. And I'm putting it up there with Into the Spider-Verse and Promare. And those are some damn good movies to compare to. As for anything I dislike about this movie, I kind of wish this movie was more morally ambiguous. And it already kind of is, and especially for a kids movie. I think this movie does a really good job of balancing the motivations of each side, but due to the actions of a character, it becomes pretty clear who's in the right and who's in the wrong. And this is something I've noticed about a lot of movies that try to be morally ambiguous. You have two sides that you don't know which to choose, but because the movie eventually wants the audience to choose one side, they'll usually make the other side do something that is pretty widely agreed upon to be wrong, and so it makes it easy for the audience to turn against that side. But that's the thing, if I knew that something was widely considered to be wrong, I wouldn't do that thing. But maybe this is just an example of how in real life, under extreme circumstances, people often make irrational decisions. This is definitely a nitpick, and it's like 1% of the actual meat of this movie, because the rest of this movie is really great. It's surprisingly funny, it's well animated, it exudes Ghibli vibes, Wu Shan looks like a grown-up Haku from Spirited Away, Fang Shi looks like Madara Uchiha from Naruto, and Xiao Hei looks like the Black Panther! Wakanda forever!